When Dr. David McKenzie was a practicing priest, like most holy men, he often moonlighted as a marriage counselor and sex therapist. Due to his deep interest in counseling couples, McKenzie left the church, took early retirement, and got himself an advanced degree in human sexuality. Today, he is a registered clinical counselor and sex therapist who thinks conflict can be normal and healthy, and sex should be celebrated. It is my pleasure to welcome Dr. David McKenzie to Studio 4 to tell us more.
Thank you. Okay.
I said you left the church because you were so interested in counseling couples. Is that all true?
Partly. As a pastoral counselor, you'll have couples coming to you, individuals coming to you with sex problems. And I just didn't have answers for a man that would come to me and say, I'm ejaculating too quickly, I can't satisfy my wife, or a woman that's saying, I have no sexual desire. I wasn't equipped, and most pastors are not. So that first triggered me in saying that most clergy are not equipped to deal with human sexuality issues. And why would I be surprised? The church has been the biggest downplayer of human sexuality in 2,000 years.
And some clergy have never had a mate.
Well, Catholic
or had
clergy,
any experience in the Catholic Church.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and part of the Orthodox Church as well. And the other thing is that the church right now, especially the Anglicans, are under a lot of conflict with the gay-lesbian issue. I happen to be a believer in full inclusion of gays and lesbians, but there's a lot of conflict in that. And a lot of clergy are getting dispirited and worn out. And the other thing is, I guess I just want to try in my little corner of the field to undo some of the damage the church has done for 2,000 years.
I like that. Yeah. Okay, let's start with a very simple question. What draws people together?
We're made to be gregarious. We're made to live in community. And marriage and coupling, most people will want to pair off. The deepest part of who we are comes out in community. We don't come out sitting by a lonely lake by ourselves. We really emerge, as Ruel Howe says, in the miracle of dialogue. And so we come to know who we are by being in community with others.
And sometimes the universe sends you a scoundrel, and sometimes the perfect person.
Well, it's far less chance than we think. 9/10 of us relates to the subconscious level. And so when someone comes to me and said, if I had known he was going to be like this, I never would have married him, I say, nonsense. You knew way more about him than you ever dreamed you did, at a subconscious level. And we will hook up with somebody. Dr. Heather Remoff did her PhD on what women look for in a mate. Very fascinating. And we will end up attaching ourselves to individuals who really are helping us work out old movies of pain in our past lives. I don't mean reincarnation. I mean our family of origin.
So if I had an emotionally unavailable father as a female, am I likely to pick an emotionally unavailable husband?
Well, no, you could also have an emotionally unavailable mother, which will cause you to choose an emotionally unavailable husband. Not if you've worked that through. A lot of us take a long time to work out those issues. But the chances are very high that you'll be involved in a relationship, and studies show it. If you have a family of alcoholics, chances are you'll choose an alcoholic. If you come from a home where the husband has beat his wife, studies show that women will choose men who beat them. So we tend to replay our childhood. We tend to work out, leave the human organism long enough, it'll heal itself. Maybe in 2210, but it'll heal itself. And so there's this deep, deep movement within us to want to be healed, and we choose people to work that through.
When you sit with a couple or an individual day after day in your practice, do you hear the same things from the men and the same things from the women? Are there threads that run through, problem threads, like he never listens to me, or our sex is rotten? Things that you hear over and over again about relationships?
Well, in terms of sexuality, the most common sexual problem that comes across a sex therapist's desk is lack of sexual desire by women. And now 2 studies have come out that have shown, one study I believe in Finland 2 years ago, that showed that nearly half of all women complain of low or no sexual desire. That can be a problem.
From the 20s on, or at a certain age?
From about, I don't know where the study started, but from all socioeconomic backgrounds, all ages, all educational backgrounds. And so the statistics suggest somewhere between 33% and 49% of women complain of this. The most common problem in men is premature ejaculation, in which they orgasm too quickly, they ejaculate too quickly, and therefore that begins to interfere with the sexual relationship. In terms of the marriage, the couple, it comes down to how they handle conflict. Dr. John Gottman, in his work with couples in Seattle, in fact, did a lot of work around this. And it's how couples address conflict that really says whether they're going to make it or break it.
How should we address conflict? You say conflict can be healthy. So if you have a conflict, no matter what it's about, there must be a way in a relationship to respect each other and deal with it without screaming and roaring down the street in the car.
You bet.
There must be a way.
Well, without the possibility of conflict, there's no possibility of relationship. And so conflict is necessary. If there's no conflict in a marriage, chances are one of you is in control. That's not healthy. Conflict is best handled by addressing the issues immediately, by responding positively to repair attempts, by not stonewalling, as Gottman says, and by not holding contempt for your partner. If we learn to build our boundaries and our borders well, be centered within ourselves and act out of that center so that we're responsible for our own emotional reactions, we're not responsible for another person's emotional reactions, we're accountable for our own behavior, that's drawing your boundaries. You're not put on this earth to make someone else happy. You're responsible for your own happiness. And that's being firm in your boundaries.
That's so important. Expecting somebody else to make you happy doesn't happen.
Doesn't work. And you can't save anybody.
Or you hear sometimes a woman say to a man say, if you just do this, I'd be happy.
Oh, no. No, no.
Doesn't work, does it? You can never satisfy a woman. You can only distract her for a while.
Well, if I hear a couple saying, you know, that my husband makes me angry or my wife makes me jealous, I say, no, no, your wife or your husband doesn't do anything like that. You make yourself jealous. You make yourself angry. And until a couple comes to be responsible for their own emotional reactions, they're constantly a victim. They're constantly blaming.
There was an article in the Province today, and you probably didn't have a chance to read it, by Betsy Hart in the opinion piece, and she did actually say in there, and she's not saying this, but somebody said, you can never satisfy a woman, you can only distract her for a while. Do you think it's a frustration of men feeling they can't make women happy?
Oh, I wouldn't generalize like that.
Okay, it's too general.
I mean, it also runs both ways. I have a lot of men coming into my office who are with non-communicative wives.
Right.
So we tend to want to stereotype and plant men here and plant women there. I think it's much more fluid than that.
So it's not, no matter what I do, I can't please her. And she feels the same sometimes. No matter what I do, I can't please him. It's not about pleasing each other, is it?
No, it's not. Pleasure lies within the beholder. It lies within the person. And I can do all sorts of things. If my wife cannot experience pleasure and happiness, then everything I do is vain. I can't make her happy. I can't make her feel pleasure.
So when you and your wife have a bit of a dust-up, how do you solve it? What do you say?
Most couples will have a dust-up, and then there'll be, as Gottman says, a repair attempt. Some little nudge, a little wink, a poke, something that the other person immediately thinks, he or she is trying to make up. Couples where they basically turn away and say, you know, go jump in the lake, I'm not talking to you, those couples will not last. But the couples where they turn to their partner and engage in a repair attempt, those are the couples that will last.
What if he doesn't want to talk about it? He just doesn't talk about it, can't do it. You say, we better have a chat.
Yeah, I think they need
and he says, I'm going to the golf course.
Yeah, but that's a very
I'll chat later.
Oh, no, that's okay. I mean, if you're really into a heated arrangement and you cannot think straight, it's good to have a timeout. But an agreed upon time where you come back and work it through. But somebody who just walks out of the room and never discusses, I see that as violence.
Well, we also are sometimes dishonest. What we're really feeling, we're afraid to say.
Well, sometimes we're dishonest with ourselves. We don't know what we feel.
True.
Yeah.
And it's so much easier to blame someone else.
Well, and that comes from our own background. And a lot of times with couples, they'll find themselves blaming the other person for their own emotional responses.
Right. So the issue is not how to avoid conflict, it's how to enjoy it, or at least manage it.
How to engage in it.
Yes, how to engage in it.
Right, how to resolve your issues.
Well, I liked what you said when you said if there's no conflict in a relationship, something's not working.
Absolutely, there's no possibility of relationship. All relationships have conflict. I mean, as Scott Peck says, once the initial period of the gaga and I'm in love with you, which really isn't love, it's really a projection of our own ideal.
Lust, eh?
Well, that too. But once that's over with, then we start the long, hard process of our egos assert themselves and we start negotiating with each other. I see marriage as two individuals with firm boundaries who say, let's negotiate how we can live peacefully together. Peaceful coexistence. It doesn't mean enmeshment. It doesn't mean whatever you feel, I feel, and what I think, you think. That's sick. That's not healthy.
Right.
That will get you in trouble.
I think so too. I mean, you may say to a mate, somebody may say to a mate, I don't want to marry my father, and a man doesn't want to marry his mother. Do you know what I mean? His wife. He wants his wife to be sexy and fabulous, not like his mother. Well, like not bossing him around, giving him lists. Well, you tell me, you're the male.
You would be very amazed at how people will choose the very mate that they had problems with as a child. So that a father that was abandoning of her and was not emotionally available, she'll end up choosing a person like that. Why? I believe because she's trying to work that through. She's trying to integrate that father within her.
Trust.
Trust.
If you didn't trust men growing up, you pick a man you can't trust?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, and that's why people, if they do not work out those issues and get rid of that baggage, studies show you'll marry the same kind of person over and over. And second marriages break down faster than first, and third marriages break down faster than second.
And over to the sex thing.
Yeah.
As you say, it's up and down and all around. Yes, it is. But some people say, well, after 2 years, you know.
Oh, 2 years is so
Saturday
short.
night after Dallas or something, or Friday night, but pretty much done with sex in our relationship.
After 2 years?
Well, I don't know. Everybody has a different, 2, 3, some 7. But you have couples. We had Fred and Carol when I was growing up. Fred and Carol were sexy when they were 70.
Okay.
You knew.
Yeah.
And I'm a kid, right?
Yeah,
But you think, Fred and Carol?
Yeah.
They're doing it.
Absolutely.
My parents aren't.
Yeah, you think. Yeah.
I think.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure, actually, with
Can
my
any child imagine their parents having sex?
No, we can't. No, we can't. But what is it about the sexual connection? Some people have it, some people don't, or do you just work it out?
Sex is always related to other parts within us and within the relationship. It never stands alone. And often sexual problems are the arena in which other issues are being worked out in the marriage.
Okay.
And so when a couple comes to me and says, we're not having sex and my wife doesn't want it, let's look at the relationship. A lot of times there's a lot of unresolved anger, rage towards her partner. For women especially, unresolved anger will shut a woman down sexually. Female sexuality is much more complex than men. We've evolved differently. We're hardwired differently. And women need much more of a security, a nesting instinct, a connection. And
a romance, an intimacy.
Sure, that comes from her evolution. That comes from how she developed. And a woman has one chance a month to get her genes into the genetic pool. One man in 1 week of ejaculations can fertilize the world.
Right.
You know.
Would you think we have, we're born with our a sex drive that's either powerful or not? Do you know how there are some couples who say we love each other madly, we have a great marriage, I accept her, she accepts me, and sex is not what drives our relationship. It's just not.
Sure.
Maybe intellect drives it.
Sure, absolutely.
Maybe golf drives it.
Absolutely, yeah. Every relationship is different. And some relationships get along by just letting each other be who they are. They don't have to work everything out, and they don't have to. They don't have a lot of arguments. They will last the long haul.
It's so easy. And a sense of humor. You know what I've always thought it was is unconditional acceptance, if there is such a term, where you say he does A, B, and C, and it drives me crazy, but I love him.
Well, sure. Actually, that's another thing that Gottman says, and that is that the one characteristic which will separate a couple is if you try to make the other into a clone of yourself. And you cannot change the other person because they have a different worldview, a different upbringing.
People don't change, per se.
That's right.
We can tune them up a bit.
Yeah. Well, we can alter our behavior.
Tune up.
We can change our behavior. And the people who think they can't change their behavior then become victims again. I can't change, so accept me who I am. Nonsense. You can change your behavior. Your basic personality is pretty well set.
How do you help someone who can't let go of a relationship? Perhaps being dumped, angry. Can't let go of him or her.
Well, it's basic grieving.
Broken heart.
Yeah, sure. It's basic grieving. If a person is stuck in their grieving, they need to go and have some grief counseling, some grief therapy. There's some tremendous therapies out there now that are empirically researched, like EMDR and other eye movement therapies. Yeah, and so I'm not trained in that, but there are colleagues who are. And sometimes people, I remember when I was a parish priest, I visited in Toronto, my first charge, this dear little old lady in an apartment. She was 89. And I walked in and I said, "How are you?" She burst into tears. "I haven't been the same since my husband died." And I said, "Well, when did he die?" 1929. Now that poor soul was stuck in her grief. Yeah.
Felt abandoned.
Absolutely. If you do not work through your grief, you're not available for another relationship.
So why can some people say, on to the next? So done with that one, on to the next. Others say, well, you know,
you got to do your
he was
grieving.
the true love. He was...
You got to do your grief. You've got to come to the place where you hit bottom, you work it through, and you say goodbye. I love, yes, I still have wonderful memories, and there was some pain there. It's over. Goodbye.
On to the next. Finally.
Only when we do that can we go on to the next. If we do that prematurely, we're not ready for the next.
It's a friend of mine who has done some therapy said when she broke up with her boyfriend, he visited a lot. You know how they run through your mind? And so her therapist said to her, well, you just say, thanks for visiting, go away. Like, it's almost like they're, you know, you see the car they drove and you think, oh, I just, darn. And the hurt comes back.
Yeah, but grieving is diving into that hurt. It's feeling it.
Feeling it.
Yeah, crying, weeping. I mean, grieving is getting down on all four and scratching your way through.
Oh,
there is no
I like
great
it.
way. Yeah.
No, I know. I remember when my marriage broke up, and even though we definitely worked it out after all was said and done, that
all the common memories.
Feeling, and it was you felt you failed, and it didn't work, and the sadness was something I've never experienced.
Absolutely,
even though it was kind of you both wanted it. Well, what's going on here?
Well, some feel that because I had a bad relationship or I hated my spouse that I don't have to grieve. You have to grieve. You've got to unload that. The dream is over. We had hoped, but the hope is gone.
Hope is gone. And you didn't fail. It was just an adventure.
Absolutely. And if people start going through life feeling their failures, that's going to really eat away at their self-confidence.
Okay, back to the sex thing.
Sure.
The husband wants to have sex every night, at least every other night. Wife says, I don't think so, Herb. What do you do? How do you work that out? Two different, different libidos,
that's right,
if you will.
Differences in sexual need is one of the big problems in sex therapy. Actually, a study just came out of the UK in last September that showed that women who have one child under the age of 5 have reduced libido by about 50%. Under 2 children under the age of 5, a lot of women are simply not having sex. They're exhausted. And so I want to understand why it is she's not responding sexually. Is it simply a matter of she has never had a strong sex drive? That's fine. How do we work with that? If she's had the sex drive and was umphy and wanted it for 2 or 3 years and suddenly it's gone sour, almost a sure indication there are issues in the relationship that need resolving.
Take some time. Have you heard of foreplay?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
Listen to me.
I'm a big promoter of foreplay.
I'm not the sex therapist, but I think that as a female, of course, it's very important.
Absolutely. Romancing, spending time, touch. Women don't necessarily walk around with an ache in their groin wanting to have sex like men do. Women are more complex. They need to be touched, and oftentimes most women will become sexually excited when they're lying in bed with their spouse, naked, touching, and feeling each other. That's where a woman becomes excited. But she doesn't got, most women don't have sex on their brain all day just dying for their husbands to walk in the door.
Unlike you. You males. No, and not all males are the same.
But see, part of the problem, Fanny, is that for years, hundreds of years, female sexuality was seen through male eyes. Now there's a shift, and male sexuality is being seen through female eyes. Both are destructive. Both are different. And men cannot be condemned for having this urge to just want to have sex, nameless sex, sex with strangers. That's an urge. It comes with our evolution. That has to be tamed in a relationship.
You have to come back to the studio. I have 25 more questions. Like, why do people have affairs? We didn't even get there.
Okay.
Will you come back?
Sure, I will.
Okay,
Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Dr. David Mackenzie. On Monday, Canadian Olympian, three-time Canadian men's figure skating champion Emmanuel Sandou speaks his mind about his sport, competition, and other things. And we have a mystery guest. Thanks for watching Studio 4. There will be lots more on Shaw TV, only on Shaw TV.